Hello and welcome to 4550 RPM, celebrating the lives of past musos born in the 40s and the 50s. I'm your host GK, yes it's a pseudonym, and this is episode 2, and we're going to offer a brief overview of the life of drummer Cozy Powell, a skilled drummer who played in many bands and on numerous projects with some of the biggest names in rock history until he died under tragic circumstances. Born Colin Blunstone on the 29th of December 1947 in Cirencester, Gloucestershire, England, Cozy Powell started playing drums at age 12 and by age 15 was already displaying his mad skills at drum solos. In his school days, he was constantly banging on his desk, like many young drummers do, and he was told by his school teacher, "You'll never make a living as a drummer." Friends said he was a private person. Keith Emerson said that nobody knew where he came from and nobody knew where he went. They competed racing motorbikes, seeing how fast they could get from, say, Sussex to London, and he didn't go out drinking as much as he enjoyed riding his motorbikes. Powell was known to be very professional, and despite his tough image, he was a lovely, sensitive, generous, soft-hearted person. Long-time mate of Cozy's, Bernie Marsden, said that outside the music scene he was almost a different person. Such a nice guy. And they played a lot of football with guys out of the Average White Band, Humble Pie and Pink Floyd. Among his influences, Cozy listed Sandy Nelson, the solo and session drummer who worked on many of the hits of the early 60s, including an early surf sound hit, Let There Be Drums, which was a 1961 guitar and drum duet. He was also a huge fan of Jeff Porcaro of Toto, who, like Powell, was a sought-after session drummer. And clearly Cozy was also a fan of jazz drummer Cozy Powell, which is where he got the moniker Cozy from. It would be impossible for me to list all of Powell's discography, as he was, like his idols, well sought after and professional. But I'll try and list some and highlight the most important. Let's start with what I regard as the main bands to highlight, and then we can go into some of the session contributions he made. Bear in mind that he did alternate between session work, solo work, and work as a band member, and sometimes these lines crossed, so for a thorough examination of his discography and history, please use your good friend Google. Powell's first band was the Corals, who apparently broke a world record at the time for non-stop playing. Following the Corals, who played mainly in youth clubs, Cozy moved on to the Sorcerers, then Youngblood, and then Ace Kefford's Stand, Ace Kefford being a co-founder of The Move. Following this, Cozy, along with a few other ex-members of Ace Kefford's Stand, put together Big Bertha with vocalist Peter French. Big Bertha issued a few singles and later French moved on to Atomic Rooster and Cozy joined the Jeff Beck group, which had a number of members pass through the band who would soon become household names such as Rod Stewart, Ronnie Wood, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, Keith Moon, and he was in great company. Cozy appeared on their 1971 release Rough and Ready and the 1972 release Jeff Beck Group. Following this, Cozy was with Bedlam, which released one self-titled album in 1973. After this, he had a number of releases under the moniker of Cozy Powell's Hammer before joining Rainbow. For the Rainbow audition, he was among about 70 others auditioning. 20 minutes later, he had the gig. Now, Rainbow is where I think we see some of his best work. Just my opinion, maybe I'm showing my bias here. Powell was with Rainbow featuring Richie Blackmore, Ronnie James Dio and Graham Bonnet, amongst others, from 1975 to 1980, appearing on both their live and studio albums of the time. And most subjectively for me, he appeared on my favourite Rainbow album, Down to Earth. Rainbow headlined the very first Monsters of Rock concert in 1980 at Donington Castle on the 16th of August 1980. The festival was Powell's last show with the band. In 1989 he also appeared on another of my favourites, Gary Moore's After the War. I plan an upcoming episode about Gary Moore, so look out for that in the future. This Moore album has so much talent on board and includes Ozzy Osbourne, Bob Daisley, Don Airey, Neil Carter, Brian Downey, Miriam Stockley and Chris Thompson, whose voice you'll know from Manfred Mann's hit Blinded by the Light. Gary Moore returned the favour and appeared on at least 3 of Cozy's solo albums, including Powell's first effort, Over the Top, released in 1979, Tilt, issued in 1981, and the tune Dartmoor, which Moore also wrote, issued on Powell's album Octopus, released in 1983. Later, Cozy teamed up with old bandmate Graham Bonnet on a couple of occasions after they both left Rainbow. He played on all Forcefield albums from the late 80s to the early 90s, and with Graham Bonnet on a couple of Bonnet solo projects. Cozy also worked with the Michael Schenker Group on a live and a studio album, and also with Whitesnake, and at least 3 albums with Brian May in 92 and 98. He also toured with Brian May, and from all accounts they were great mates. Cozy also appeared on 3 albums with Black Sabbath, including the 1989 release Headless Cross, on which he co-produced and co-wrote a number of songs. Later, he appeared on Yngwie Malmsteen's, it always gets me this name, I used to say Wangi or Yngwie or whatever, but let's go with Yngwie Malmsteen's Facing the Animal, one of Powell's last recordings before his death. Now, as far as I can ascertain, Cozy's last recorded contribution was to Colin Blunstone's 1998 album The Light Inside. You might know Blunstone from his time with the Zombies and his vocals on their huge hits She's Not There and Time of the Season. The track Losing You from The Light Inside, which Cozy appears on, is dedicated to him, and I quote, "Losing You is dedicated to Cozy Powell, whose brilliance lit up the studio on these last sessions. Your light shines on," unquote. It's a lovely pop track and you can find it on YouTube if you'd like to have a listen. Powell's style has been described as hard-hitting or thundering, and I have to say, whether I'm listening to the Jeff Beck releases or Rainbow, I can tell that it's Cozy, if that makes sense to you. I hope it does. Now, before I go on here, we must also remember that with all of this recording work, there was also a huge amount of touring with many of the acts mentioned, songwriting, and don't forget, he had a personal life to live as well, so he can certainly be counted amongst the hard workers in the music industry. Okay, so let's have a quick blast through Cozy's session and guest appearances, and this is by no means complete. Okay, so in 1970, he appeared at the Isle of Wight Festival, where he played drums for Tony Joe White. Coincidentally, Paul Kossoff, the subject of our first episode, also played at that same festival with Free. Incidentally, the Isle of Wight Festival was the largest music event of its time, with a larger audience than Woodstock. Isn't that something? Cozy played on Donovan's Cosmic Wheels, released in 1973, Ashton and Lord's 1974 released First of the Big Bands. This project included drummers Ian Pace, Carmine Apiece, and more, so he was amongst great company there. He worked again with John Lord on his 1982 release Before I Forget, and on Robert Plant's Pictures at 11 in the same year. He also worked with Hot Chocolate, Roger Daltrey, Warlock, Peter York, Tony Martin, and Glen Tipton of Judas Priest fame, who we will talk about a little more here. Glen Tipton released his first album, Baptism of Fire, in 1997, which featured a number of great musos, including Billy Sheehan, Neil Murray, Don Airey, and John Entwistle, another muso I plan to do a presentation on in the future. Of course, we are talking about this album because Cozy played on a number of tracks, including the title track, Baptism of Fire. Of his time with Cozy, Tipton said that they would enjoy a beer, a curry, or a pie together, do a little fishing, and then they would get together in the studio and work on material for the album, and he, like many others I'm sure, said it was a privilege to work with Powell. Indeed, he dedicated his second solo album to both Entwistle and Powell. Released in 2006, this album, Edge of the World, released under the name of Tipton, Entwistle and Powell, consists of unreleased tracks from the Baptism of Fire sessions, which of course Entwistle and Powell were a part of. So I guess we can consider this a posthumous release for Entwistle and Powell. Tipton said that, quote, "I'm sure everyone will know this album is a tribute to their unique styles and skills and a small part of the immense legacy they have left behind, which will continue to inspire people all over the world for many years to come," unquote. So switching gears now to the sadder part of this presentation. Cozy Powell, like many of our rock heroes, died under tragic circumstances. Cozy was killed in a car accident while he was on his way to see his girlfriend. He was driving his Saab 9000 at high speed in bad weather near Bristol while talking on his mobile phone. The official investigation also found evidence of a slow puncture in a rear tyre that it was suggested could well have caused the sudden collapse of the tyre with a consequent loss of control of the car. Let me read from a BBC article dated 25th of April 1998, which I will include in the description box down below. Quote, "The girlfriend of 70s rock star Cozy Powell listened on the phone as his car spun out of control at 104 miles an hour, killing him instantly, an inquest has heard. Mr. Powell, 50, was talking to his girlfriend Sharon Reeve on his mobile phone when his black Saab 9000 Turbo crashed on the M4 near Bristol on 5 April. Ms. Reeve said she heard a terribly loud noise. Then Mr. Powell said, 'Oh shit,' followed by silence. She phoned the emergency services when she was unable to ring Mr. Powell back. He was pronounced dead on arrival at Frenchay Hospital in Bristol. Bristol coroner Paul Forrest recorded a verdict of accidental death. Mr. Powell, who was over the drink-drive limit and not wearing a seatbelt, had complained that he was having trouble finding fifth gear and said he hoped the engine would not seize up because he was driving so fast. The Saab suffered a rear tyre puncture shortly afterwards that sent it spinning out of control. It hit the central reservation and rolled several times before coming to rest on a grass verge. PC Ian Cater, who was off duty and travelling in the opposite direction at the time of the accident, said he saw Mr. Powell's car coming cartwheeling past him before it landed on his roof." Unquote. Graham Bonnet said he had received a call from Don Airey, who informed him that Cozy was gone. He said he dropped the phone and cried. He then looked out the window and was crying and saw two rainbows and saw the end of one and quickly got a video camera and took some footage and has not looked at that film since he took it. In 2016, a plaque dedicated to Powell was unveiled in his hometown of Cirencester. Queen guitarist Brian May unveiled the plaque in Cirencester alongside Suzi Quatro, Tony Iommi, Neil Murray and Bernie Marsden. John Tiffany from the Cirencester Civic Society said, "Until now, the Civic Society, which is 50 years old this year, has only put up blue plaques to commemorate buildings. So this is the first ever plaque to commemorate a person." I'd like to finish this episode on a more upbeat note and tell you that in 1991, Cozy appeared on the BBC programme Record Breakers, where he set a world record for playing the most drums in under 1 minute live on television. That number was 400. Okay, that's the end of episode 2 of 4550 RPM. If you enjoyed this show, please remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, Merry Christmas, everybody. Remembering Cozy Powell, born 29 December 1947 and sadly died 5 April 1998.